Welcome back to the David Curtin Show. I'm David Curtin on today's News Talk TNT, and it's really good to have with me now Amy Gallagher, who is a nurse and a psychotherapist. And Amy, welcome to the show.
Hi, David. Thanks for having me. Good to be
No,
here.
great to have you on the show. Now, you've just made or presented a video which has gone out just very recently, I think, called Trans, Racist and Woke, How Psychology Went Mad, which is
That's
a
right.
really interesting title. I've looked at some of it. Can you tell us a little bit about that video and why you made it?
Well, so this is something that's been produced with New Cultural Forum,
Mm,
which is an organisation I've been involved with for quite some time now.
mm,
I first got involved with them really when I went on there to give an interview about a legal case I was involved with. So I'm a nurse, as you said, and I was training to be a psychotherapist at the Tavistock,
mm,
and they were teaching critical race theory as though it was a fact. And I simply pointed out that it wasn't a fact, and actually there's lots of different views, and my view is different. I have an opposing view to critical race theory. And what unfolded after that was essentially 2 years of bullying, telling me I'm unsafe, telling me I shouldn't be able to be a psychotherapist, put me through disciplinary procedures, even going as far as to say that I shouldn't be allowed to be a nurse. And this was over a couple of years ago. They had essentially hounded me off the course, stopped me from obtaining my qualification. I'm now in the process of suing them for that. And yeah, so I spoke about this about a year ago, and the legal case is ongoing. But since then, I've had so much support from psychologists and psychotherapists reaching out to me saying we feel exactly the same way. More needs to be done to speak out about the incursion of politics and ideology into psychology and mental health. So I made this proposal to do a documentary about it. And yeah, it came out last week and it's called How Psychology Went Mad.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And I heard about the case, and they said some terrible things about you. And it was they were saying that, you shouldn't be able to speak because you're a white person or something like this, that whiteness was bad,
Yeah.
Christianity was bad because it was white and it was to do with white culture. And if someone had said that about black people or Jewish people or Indian people, they would get taken down for being racist themselves. But this is the critical race theory, is that you can say anything you like about white people, and to me this is anti-white racism, clearly, but they get away with it. I mean, why do you think that people can do this and get away with it these days?
Well, we're seeing it increasingly more in our society. I mean, recently there was a theatre show on in London that was saying they didn't
Mm,
want white people to attend because they didn't want the white gaze to be present. This is something that comes out of
mm,
critical race theory. I'm quite a liberal person. I believe in freedom of speech. I believe in people's right to believe in critical theory or even critical race theory. The issue is that it has a very authoritarian tendency, whereas what actually happens is that you're not even allowed to disagree with it. That to me is the main
mm,
issue. These theories exist. I'm happy for people to reference them, but there's inbuilt into it that anybody criticizes it, it's just a sign that they are racist and they
mm,
don't want to accept the fact that they're racist. So it's inbuilt into it that you're not allowed to disagree, and that
mm,
to me is tyrannical. So it's really
mm,
really concerning me that this is a theory, an academic theory that is now entering into the mainstream, entering into in my case, into the NHS, but
mm.
entering into the arts, and media, and so on. When really it should just remain as an academic theory and not a fact, and certainly not something we should, um, you know, be using to influence our behaviour and our decisions.
Yeah, in the video, you actually mentioned the Frankfurt School, which is where it comes from, and is people
Yeah.
there like Horkheimer and so on have developed this. And Herbert Marcuse is someone you specifically mentioned. I mentioned him here on the show a couple of times, and he wrote this essay, Repressive Tolerance, in
That's right.
1965. And that is one of the key texts in order to explain what's going on here, because what he suggests is that there was a traditional conservative hegemony, and that needed to be inverted so that there will be tolerance to anything on the left wing, but there will be intolerance to anything that was considered right wing. I mean, whether you call that left or right now, I don't know. But the idea of critical race theory would be tolerated. But then anyone who has any traditional views or any even a traditional culture needs to be repressed in order to bring in some kind of new progressive liberal world. And it's horrible, it's horrific, and it's absolutely totalitarian. It's just a long march through the institutions. It's happening everywhere, isn't it? It's not just the health service, it's education, and it's political parties, it's media, it's even business these days. And you have so many diversity, equality, and inclusion officers, often on very, very high salaries. You have an army of them, and it's very difficult for a single person to fight that army of diversity officers who are imposing this critical race theory on you and have lots of power within the institutions. Is that something that you found in the NHS?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, before I became a nurse, I did a degree in English literature, and I found it very dissatisfying because I was only being told a kind of Marxist critical theory
Mm,
approach to literature. So I went from that degree and I wanted to completely get away from theory and intellectuals. So I thought if I go into nursing, nursing is just purely about helping people. It's not political, and it will feel really worthwhile and meaningful. And then that is the reason why most people go into nursing or healthcare, that they just want to help people with their lives, or
mm,
and be able to cure people and treat people and so on. But unfortunately, what I've seen, in the last 10 years that I've been working as a nurse, is the ideas that I kind of wanted to get away from at
mm,
university when I did my English degree have now become more and more prevalent in the NHS, where nurses are
mm,
being told to, for example, I last year I was sent an email round saying that there was an anti-racist training organization coming in, but it was to discuss internalized racism, and only BAME members of staff could attend. So, it's racial segregation, but essentially, and we're seeing more and more instances of this in the NHS and in relation to healthcare. I mean, we've seen my documentary covers the Tavistock, which was
mm.
heavily influenced by gender ideology,
Yeah.
and which is now seen, it's had lawsuits from whistleblowers, from former patients that felt that they were pushed into doing things or couldn't speak out about treatments that were being influenced by radical ideology as opposed to evidence-based healthcare. So
Mm,
it's really concerning, and it's such a shame. As I said, I wanted to get away from ideology,
mm.
and now it's really hard if you just want to be a person in any profession to be able to get away from this. As you said, it seems to have taken over all of our institutions.
Yeah, I mean, started with education. Obviously, that's where the Frankfurt School was, an educational institute.
Yeah.
Was in Frankfurt, obviously, and then migrated to the USA in the 30s. But yeah, you would think though, you go and do English literature, you're going to study that because you want to study the beauty of the literature and the form and what it means. You don't want to have all these lecturers telling you, well, that book is racist and that book is misogynist and that's homophobic, which seems to be what you get in education these days. But my background is in science. I have a chemistry degree. I was a chemistry teacher for a long time, and I haven't been a chemistry teacher. I haven't actually been actively involved in education for nearly 10 years. So it wasn't so much of an issue in science in schools 10 years ago, but now things are being brought in. You've got these LGBT across the curriculum, for example. And you've got obviously in the NHS, you've got courses about critical race theory, and you've got this transgender affirmation, which it makes no sense because, to my mind, there are two sexes, male and female, and there is no such thing as gender that's different to sex. And then people affirming children or even adults in their gender dysphoria really is, it's completely damaging to them because then they pump them full of hormones and then maybe mutilate them. But this is where they are. And it just seems completely insane to me.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, in my documentary, I cover how the American Psychological Association came out recently and essentially said that children should be able to decide what gender they are, and clinicians should be guided by what the child says.
Mm.
And they give some examples. For example, children who define their gender by the location that they're in, or the season that they're in, or gender fluid. There's a long list of kind of genders which children are saying that they are or seem to be reporting. And the American Psychological Association essentially said that clinicians should just simply go along with this. Now we know children have vivid imaginations and they're trying to work out the world. They don't know enough about the
mm,
world or know enough about themselves. They don't really even understand concepts such as gender or sex yet. So the idea that you would just go along with what a child says is actually really damaging. And the
mm,
Cass review showed this, that said there's an aspect of social transitioning which is actually could potentially be psychologically harmful to the child,
mm,
because it confuses them. And it means that they have to feel that they have to go down a line of identifying in a certain way, and they may feel that they can't, come back from that. So yeah, I mean, it's terrifying that this is happening, particularly in the area of health, but education as well.
mm. It is. I mean, you're getting this everywhere. The question is, we know this, and I've been speaking about this topic, critical theory, cultural Marxism for a number of years, and it's hard to put your finger on it. But when you give it a name, then you can understand it, and you can see where it comes from. So you can see how this is spreading as well, and it's being spread deliberately by an army of activists who are getting into all these institutions and trying to change and invert the values. But the question is, for people like you and me, how do we fight this? How do we change this and push back on that? Have you got any ideas about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's very difficult to. I mean, in my case, I'm bringing a legal case. I think,
Yeah, yeah.
lawfare is one way to fight this. We've seen,
Mm,
particularly with transgender ideology in this country, there's been a few legal cases, and the case of Alison Bailey, the Mayor for Starter case, people speaking out, asserting their gender critical beliefs and saying, actually, I don't believe in gender. And it's now
mm,
become a protected characteristic to say that you're gender
yeah.
critical. So you can't discriminate somebody on the basis of having gender critical beliefs, which is
Mm,
fantastic. And obviously, the Tavistock shut down in response to lawsuits. So I think legal cases is one way. People just speaking up more and more. I think in the media, things
mm,
like TNT radio, alternative medias. But I think what really needs to happen, and this is something that I've been saying for a while, is that it really shouldn't be down to ordinary people to have to go through legal cases. I mean, they're really stressful. I mean, mine's very
mm,
stressful and they're really costly, and it's very unlikely that people are going to want to do that. What really needs to happen is the government needs to step in and do more.
mm,
We've had a Tory government for over 10 years now, and this long march for the institutions has happened while we've had a Conservative government.
yeah.
They really need to. I think politicians really need to be doing more, because otherwise it's just down to ordinary people to push back, and that's going to be very, very difficult. I mean, they could very simply just defund the diversity industry, defund
Mm,
all of these diversity, equity, and inclusion officers. Like in the NHS, there's over 10,000 roles that are in some way linked to diversity, equity, inclusion. That's ridiculous. We have nurses and doctors going on strike for more pay, but they are spending
wow.
millions on diversity, equity, inclusion officers. And the
All
government.
of those, sorry, yeah, go, sorry. I
No, go
interrupted
on.
you.
Go on.
Sorry. No, all of those people, they'd be better off if you sent them to go and pick some fruit on a farm, isn't it? People are always saying
Exactly.
we don't have enough people to pick our fruit and to do farming. Well, they could go and do that, and they'd actually do something useful with their lives if you send them to
Yeah.
do that, rather than bringing in loads of migrants to do the jobs because there's no one in this country to do them. But I totally agree with you. Just get rid of the whole diversity, equality, and inclusion industry. I think we need some radical reform of the Equality Act, actually, either amend it significantly or repeal it and go back to pre-existing laws, because some of the things in there, section 149, particularly the public sector equality duty, it creates a need for compliance with the acts and all the regulations that come with it. And I call the government the fake conservatives, because it's happened on their watch. It started under Blair and Brown, but it's continued under Cameron, the heir to Blair, and everybody else. They've made it worse. They haven't made it better. What do you think?
No. No, that's
Yeah.
right. It has come worse under the Conservatives. I think they come out with rhetoric now and again about woke ideology, but they don't seem to do much. And
Mm,
I agree with you about the Equality Act. I think and that was brought in under Blair. The Conservatives haven't, revisited it or changed it in any way. And the Inequalities Act, it really doesn't make sense. It pits certain groups against each other. So you have the protected characteristic of gender reassignment surgery, and then you have the protected characteristic of sex and of women, and those two things don't go. They run counter. So it's very difficult to know how you protect one group over one group's rights over another group's rights. I think we should just have a more general kind of discrimination based kind of law that doesn't get too heavy into the particular, identifying certain groups. But yeah, I mean, the irony is that all of this diversity, equity, inclusion stuff that's bringing in, a lot of the ideas that it teaches run contrary to the Equalities Act, even though it's got the word equality in it. But it teaches to, discriminate certain people on their protected characteristics, like white people, like men, Christians often. So it's actually illegal. So it's not only, those people that you said would be better off picking fruit in a field. Yeah, I think they would, because they do less harm. They wouldn't be doing anything illegal. And they
That's right.
So it's just ridiculous. It's counterproductive.
Yeah, absolutely. You get these characteristics, these 9 characteristics in the Equality Act. But if you're, these are Marxian ideologies. They split, sex into male and female, and say, well, all men are oppressors as a class, and all women are oppressed as a group. And then the gender reassignment. So if you're transgender, you're oppressed and by transphobic society, and so on. So if you're not in a victim class, according to these different protected characteristics, then you are a loser in terms of law, and you actually find yourself having less recourse to law and being a second-class citizen, if you like, because of the Equality Act, which is not actually bringing in equality, it's really bringing in inequality. So it is doing the exact opposite of what they say it should be doing. Amy, it's been really lovely to talk to you. It's nearly 2:00 now. We just have a few seconds left. Tell people where they can find out a little bit more about you, just in the next 20-30 seconds.
Yeah, so the documentary is called How Psychology Went Mad, and you can find me on GoFundMe at Stand Up to Woke, on Twitter at Stand Up to Woke.
Fantastic. Thank you, Amy. Thank you so much for joining me, and all the best in your case. This is today's News Talk, TNT.